one thing that I wanted to talk about is the psychological benefits of prayer. Because to me, when I was younger, it really seemed stupid to me. It seemed ridiculous. I remember like reading some study that some guy did a scientific study where he prayed over certain patches of land to see if they would grow more. And it's like, obviously, like, that doesn't work, but that's a very simplistic reading. And I've always seen prayers closer to like meditation or something like that, but just a different way. And like different religions have their different ways of prayer. But it seems like there is a slight difference between prayer and meditation. I'm not exactly sure what, though.
Some of that, I think, when you were saying it, I was thinking about how there's this whole wave, like that new age thinking of just visualizing in your mind what you want and it'll come to you. And that's kind of
the
like
quantum dimension.
Yeah.
The law of attraction, right? I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I feel like a lot of prayer for, like, I almost used a bad word there. I don't know. People who don't know about meditation, that kind of prayer, they do is like visualize what they want, or if like they want someone healed, or if they want healing in their life. Because even if you don't believe in like some quantum bullshit about like the law of attraction, there is something about like imagining something and like that helping you achieve it.
Yeah, there's an aspect to just visualizing things. I mean, for instance, there's a lot of, actually, I don't know if there's a lot of research, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, at least, for people like MMA fighters, just people in general who visualize something before they do it. Whether you're giving a speech, you stand there and visualize yourself just giving this amazing speech with the applause and everything. And apparently it just kind of, it wires your body to prepare for the actual physical action of doing that thing. So I guess, theoretically, since it, might get you physiologically prepared to have the thing done that you want, if you visualize it, it is helpful. But my question is, like, what is prayer? Is it asking for things? Is it visualizing? Is the definition tight?
For me, I would say prayer and meditation would be separate. Prayer is something you would be like in a position to kind of, it's like a humble request, right? You're asking from a place like with like humility in mind. You are asking for something, I would say, to a certain extent. Some people, they begin every single day, every morning with prayer. Just, it might not even be actually asking for something. It could just be, thank you that I'm alive today. Thank you that I have a whole nother day. I can breathe. I'm alive. I have a family. I'm well. So I've seen a lot of different things, right? I've seen people pray for certain things, right? Please let me pass this exam. I have this coming up, right? Hopefully I get a good job, good internship. And then there's also a kind of prayer that just, it's like a kind of expression of gratitude, right? And I feel like meditation is a little bit different because meditation has several purposes, right? One is to kind of focus the mind. One is to kind of explore who you are, right? And it's kind of hard to explain, but when you do meditation, it's more of going inside, looking inwards, right? Prayer might be a good expression of self-reflection too, but meditation kind of goes deeper into that. And like going off what you guys were saying earlier, right, about visualizing, there actually is a study done that they took a certain subjects, I don't know exact numbers, right, but they had people basically, they did some, they imagined, they visualized themselves working out for like 20 minutes before they worked out every single day. Or actually, yeah, so this was a study. They took some test subjects that didn't work out at all and some test subjects that didn't work out but visualized that they worked out as hard as they can for 20 minutes a day. And they did it for like a month. And what they found is after the month, when they tested them through like weightlifting or whatever, the people who visualized that they were working out for 20 minutes were able to lift more weights. So it's amazing what that comes to. And another study I can talk about, actually have done extensive research on, is by a neuroscientist, a Ph.D, Sara Lazar. She's from Harvard University. And she was actually exploring meditation and the effects it has not just on the brain physically, right? So she took some test subjects and had them do meditation, I think for mindfulness meditation for 30 minutes a day for about a month or two. And what she did was take MRI scans of their brain before and after the meditation sessions, like throughout the 1 month period. What she found was absolutely astonishing. Essentially, what happened was the whole shape of the brain actually changed. So,
Like the physical shape of their brain
yes,
changed?
yeah,
What?
the physical shape of the brain. So, as you know, right, brain's composed of gray matter, right? And we have different parts of the brain that deal with different functions. So the areas of the brain that would deal with, stress, anxiety, depression, all these things like just like, anger, temperament, those areas of the brain actually shrunk. And the place in the brain to deal with the, memory, retention, mood control, compassion, empathy, they actually increased. Right? You could look up the studies. I don't have like all the facts off the top of my head.
Believe you.
But
yeah, we'll try to get it and include it in the show notes.
Yeah. So I can pull it up to you guys later. But it's an amazing study, right? I've seen like the actual physical benefits, right? So my freshman year of college, I was actually building up to about 4 hours of meditation every day.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and just the feeling of it, like as soon as you throughout the day, it's just a whole entire different experience, right?
Yeah, how much does that stick with you? Because I notice I have some days where I'll do my 20-minute, half-hour meditation,
Right.
and it sticks with me for a few hours. Other times I just kind of get up and like forget I did it and make breakfast because my intention's not there. But
Right.
4 hours, how does that permeate your day afterwards?
Yeah, so it just has such a profound effect, right? It's all about the effort you do, right? Meditation isn't just something you do mindlessly, it's something you have to do mindfully. And when you do it mindfully with that intention, with purpose, with focus, it really, really, sharpens your mind up. Like you feel clear all day, clarity, right? I know my grades were just all straight A's. Those 2 years that was like really, really hammering
So
in the meditation.
No excuses, students. There's time.
Yeah.
It improves you, yeah, if you want better grades, just add some meditation in. It's the same thing, right? We train our body, right? We train our body to do sports or whatever, you train your muscles. Why wouldn't you train your brain as well, right?
I really like the aspect of meditation that it is completely focused internally, because all of our lives, like if I'm not meditating or just like laying in bed, then I'm thinking about what I have to do or who I have to please or something like outside of my head. But as I think a lot of us have hit on, the time where you like really become yourself and quote unquote meet God is when you're like focused internally and really discovering like that part of you that you don't know. And that's just, I don't know, that's just amazing to me that we don't do that more.
Yeah. So something I want to turn to also is the different conceptions of God and how different people view God differently. Because to me, it's always been a very personal thing. Like I think that everybody needs to figure out how they view it themselves, because it's like connecting to the transcendent. But I want to hear your guys' view.
Well, this actually sort of goes along the lines of what we were just talking about, but I was just thinking while you were talking about meditation that I wouldn't really say that there's an equivalent in Christianity to meditation, but if I were to choose something, it would probably be worship. But it's very different because it's not self-reflective. You don't look inside of you. I would say during worship, it's, forgetting yourself and just looking at God, not thinking necessarily about God. I mean, maybe you're considering his characters or his characteristics that come to mind while you're worshiping, but a lot of it is focusing on God without specific thoughts about him, sort of like meditation would be focusing on yourself without necessarily specific thoughts about yourself, if that's the right perception. But at the same time, like prayer is a huge part of the Christian faith. And I think that it can also be done without specific thoughts. I think that I can pray, but not necessarily be saying, God, please give me this. God, please help me do this. But it can be just me being with God. So I think that could also be a form of meditation in Christianity. And I think that sort of gives some insight into how Christians view God, because I think our perception of God is a little bit misconceived by some people.
I think it's definitely mischaracterized.
I think a lot of Christianity is. I think the biggest thing for me that's mischaracterized is how we view ourselves. Because one of the biggest things in Christianity that people should understand is that we are not trying to be good on our own. A huge part of Christianity is realizing that we can't be good on our own and relying upon God to help us be good. So that is one of the biggest ways that I view God is my salvation from myself. So it's just sort of a
I'm
way
glad
to
you
start.
brought up worship, because to me that's like one of the best ways of approaching like the topic of God, because even if in like Christian literature, like having an idol is seen as like the worst sin, and that's like something you're worshiping. So to worship something is pretty much to make it God. And to me, I was raised Christian, and it kind of goes along the same lines, but kind of abstracted, is that God is that which is like the most valuable characteristics of like the human spirit. And we try to like, and it's like the upholding of like those values that we have amassed throughout time that lead to like a productive and peaceful civilization. It's like the embodiment of a personality of all those values.
When it's explained that way, that is a lot different than people do characterize Christianity. I think a lot of people have this conception of, and I guess it might not be particularly untrue, but they think of God not as a characteristic or as something that's within you, but as something like completely separate, like way above, way different than you, and something I guess you don't see till maybe you are not alive anymore. James, I had a question for you. I guess, what is your conception of God? I guess because you had mentioned earlier that there's a type of prayer where you just sit with God and there's no words involved. It's just being with God. And in that sense, it does seem like it's sitting with yourself. But is there a difference between the two?
I think a large part of it is to be in awe of God. There's a large part of it that is, a fascination. And a large part of the Christian faith is also is understanding that we can't understand God. And the easiest way to see that is through the Trinity, which is the three parts of God but who are one, which is something that we just can't understand. There's not really an illustration that we can understand that demonstrates how God the Father, God the Spirit, and God the Son can be fully one yet separate. And so I think that awe is the primary way to pray without necessarily speaking, because you sit in God's presence without necessarily hearing anything from Him or saying anything to Him, but understanding that He is very high above us.
Now, this might be simplistic, but would you characterize God as synonymous with awareness or consciousness?
No, I don't think so.
So is God to you, I think as I was growing up in a Southern Baptist, it was always God is literally a person in another place. Is that how it is for you? Not a person, but like a
Entity.
Yeah, an entity, yeah.
Well, so do you mean, by saying a person in another place, do you mean that He's separate from us, or just that He is another entity?
Another entity, yeah.
Yes, I do think that God is a separate entity. Okay. But the reason I ask is because, I do think that He is not necessarily in one place.
Yeah, he's everywhere.
He's omnipotent and all-knowing and in all places at all times. So
that's interesting because, Sikhism basically says there's two forms of God. It says there's this physical form, basically, what you see of all the creation, and then there's this subtle form. We call it Nirangar. It's like it's something that we can't see with our physical faculties. And another thing is, we believe that while that subtle form is within each and every one of us. So what would be like that drop in the water in the ocean analogy, but essentially we truly believe as Sikhs that there's actually no difference between us and God. we don't realize it because our mind's not in a place or to understand it or experience it. And very similar to Christian beliefs, which I probably should have mentioned or be more clear about, is that, a lot of this can't just happen with your own hard work. It does, to some extent, take some sort of, grace, right? Some sort of blessing. But essentially, like, it's very interesting. The concept of God for us, it's not like it starts with that meditation, like I said, that Simran, but the actual end result of Simran is to merge fully into God, your mind, your soul submerging into God. And without getting too deep, essentially what that was is like when you do this mantra meditation, you start with the word and you clear your mind, you're supposed to be able to begin to hear the voice of God. And what I mean voice of God, I mean we believe that the voice of God is what created the whole universe, the sound of creation. So
that's very similar to Christian.
Science says, the Big Bang, right? What was the bang? A sound. In the same way, like, like Christians, I'm sure believe.
I'm a physicist, so I can't really agree with that, but you can, yeah.
So, that's also, I think in the Bible says, when God spoke. And
yeah.
Then, right? So we believe when you do meditation, you clear the mind. It's like the same thing with like a radio and a frequency. Like if God's everywhere, right? Like we said, omnipotent, why can't we see him? Why can't we hear him? Why can't we speak to him? Right? And that is what Sikhism tries to explain, that, it is possible, but you have to you can't be using your physical faculties, your worldly knowledge to get there. It's something.
Okay, sorry. To me, that word, that spoken word, which is apparently in Sikhism and Christianity, we give it to God because it is like the taking of all that is around us and understanding it and like making it something that other people can use. That's like really what I've touched on with like the word of God, and like that understanding and seeing is like one of the most important aspects of being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of being human. I've come to that also because I've really come to think of that. You see it in a lot of religions that the universe, the reality being starts with the word of God. And it's always word. It's like a language, a linguistic thing, which is part of our abstraction process, which is what makes us special, and which is something that I think is fundamentally important in Judeo-Christian values, is that we're made in the image of God. We have this linguistic abstraction like ability that we can't really explain, that separates us from other animals, and we're made in his image in that way.
It's really amazing how, I think this is kind of where Sikhism almost originated from, but how all these creation myths and understandings of God all have these similar archetypal underpinnings that, it's a lot of it comes from that word, and a lot of it comes from like seeing and understanding and like the upholding of culture.
Well, that's why the word is so fundamentally important. It's the upholding of culture, because I guess, once you are unable to use the word, you're unable to identify when things are moving in a direction away from, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. I guess it lets us sound the alarms, and it lets us pay attention to when we are moving away from our values. By using the word, we can speak up, we can say what is going on around us. And I guess it's fundamentally tied in too with seeing. Listening, seeing allows us to form our thoughts and use words to, revive our dead father.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting how archetypal that is, and how it just continuously pops up and allows us to make sure that our societies and our culture doesn't deviate from what was healthy, what's kept us alive.
Yeah. But at the same time, even though it's something that upholds culture, it's what we use to navigate like how we will change culture in the face of like new chaos or anything like that. While you were talking, Rich, can you go ahead and say what you think of God, what your conception of it is?
Oh, wow. Sure. So I come from a different background. I was, well, not really different than Eric, I guess, but I was, militant atheist in high school, and actually middle school. And then high school, I just didn't really think about it much. But then as I came to college, it's really a question I started to deal with. And I guess if I really had to, it's hard to just say like God is this, obviously, because it's something beyond conception. But if I had to start using synonyms, I guess it's awareness or consciousness. You know, it's the thing that we all have. All of us are conscious right now. We are 5 conscious human beings, and we all have individual experiences. But the thing is, we are all conscious. It is one thing. It's not separate. And that's, I guess, where the closest I can get to explaining what God is to me without, just making a bunch of like woo-woo noises, and because it's so experiential, it's so beyond words for me. And
I mean, a lot of people do make those woo-woo noises to actually like signify what God is.
Yeah,
that might be the best way to do it.
It actually is. Oh yeah. And it's just like not even joking, like paying attention to vibrations.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of insane.
Vibration, sounds, frequencies. Yeah.
You're listening to our vibrations right now.
It's interesting that God is connected to consciousness for you, Rich, because to me, especially with meditation, I see meditation as reaching God or trying to reach out to God, and meditation is trying to like kind of get rid of your consciousness so you can be with God in a way.
Okay, now I think we're just getting sticky with linguistics. I guess we have different ideas of consciousness.
Yeah.
I guess you're thinking of consciousness as in the sense of being like self-conscious.
Yeah. Okay. So you're
I'm thinking of consciousness.
You're not thinking of like consciousness as the ego.
No, I think a better word would be like the awareness that we all have.
Okay.
The deep, true awareness that's still and never leaves any of us.
Yeah.
But it's often hidden.
Yeah, because wasn't that one of the Mesopotamian gods had eyes like all around his head or something? Because one of the really important abilities of human is our ability to pay attention.
And I'm drawing a blank on his name. Does anybody here remember? Some Eric. Yeah, it's Marduk. It's Marduk, and he has the eyes around his head, so he's all he's all seeing. And then I can't remember the name.
Magic words, right?
What was the name? Yeah, and he also spoke magic words. And then all the other Mesopotamian gods came to him and said, "Hey, we need you to defeat." And I can't remember her name.
I don't.
But basically, she was chaos itself. And
we
so
should just do a separate episode on that.
Yeah, we should. But he ends up chopping her up and making the world out of her. He takes chaos, turns it into order, and makes the world out of it because he could see and hear. And that's insane. And he spoke magic words, and that's so akin to what humans do.
Yeah, and that's really similar to the beginning of Genesis when God speaks words and then things are there suddenly. And it's weird. It's something you kind of notice in branding too. If you come up with a catchy name and you like start saying it, all of a sudden like people are like, "Oh yeah, that's a thing," and then it's a thing because people are just saying it.
Yeah, once it's in someone's head, it's like made real.
That is strange because we can, it's like there's an elephant in the room, or I guess when you think about like relationships or something, if neither of the people say anything, even though it's a problem for both of them, it's like you don't have to face it. But as soon as someone mentions the problem, you're like, "Oh my, you did it. Now we got to look at it." Great. It's like it was real the whole time, but now it's real because you spoke it. You used the word to describe it.
Yeah, and it's going to cause some chaos at first, but then you're going to create something new from it. Or completely
or you
destroy
just, yeah, you fucked up. You pointed it out, and now everything's ending.
That's the scary part of going into the unknown, because you never know if you're going to come out with paradise or you're going to come out with destruction. And I think what God is like our guiding force in how we should interact with the chaos of the world to make what is unknown known and valuable to other people.
Could you describe that a little bit? He's our guiding force? Or
he's like I said before, it's
hard to use the word he, really. I don't.
Sorry. Yeah. I might piss some people off.
Well, the language is tricky, so a lot of this is semantics, but just the concept.
Gender neutral pronouns. Yeah. Z is no. Right? But God to me is like that collection of like, when I say values, I don't mean like truth or something like that. I mean like actions, almost like procedures of like ways of acting in the world that are the proper way to act. Like instead of like actual like facts, like truth facts being a value, it would be like telling the truth is a value, and facing the unknown is a value. So I just want to make that clear first. And then to me, God is the collection of those values that we use to properly go and face what we don't know, the things that scare us, and create like a society from it, basically. And like that's what we were saying with like the upholding of culture.
And that fascinates me because every single one of us has technically, if we're using the words, had very different definitions of God, but in the same sense, very non-different. And they all, it says God is all these things, and they don't even rub against each other, which is pretty fascinating.
It kind of just permeates into everything, like what you said about, consciousness. In Sikhism, we believe that we're actually living, all universe to creation is living within God's mind. So in a sense, like, there's that whole one consciousness. How do you put it into words? It's everywhere, and you could say in a way that it's because we're living in that consciousness, that one consciousness.
The thing can't conceptualize itself.
Right.
Otherwise, the conceptualization is not the thing, because it's the conceptualization of it.
Yeah, it'd be like looking at your own ego.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. I don't know if I want to see that actually.
Well,
in the mirror.
If you want to talk about that, actually, with meditation, we believe you can go ahead and see the mind. And I don't know how abstract this could get, but I just want to share from personal experience. We believe that the mind in its truest form is actually a light. Like, for instance, when you close your eyes, it's all black, right? So we believe the reason why that is because just the mind isn't pure, because the ego is still present. And the thing is, when you do meditation, when you remove this ego, you kind of remove that barrier. So I'll just throw this out there, but I was doing meditation one day, and I felt so much connection, right? And we were talking about this consciousness, this focus, this attention. It's all about that focus. We call that, so to put the semantics in the, perspective, basically, we say the mind, the focus, the concentration, the consciousness, we all say it's the same thing. And I was doing this meditation, I was so focused and so into it, I could feel my consciousness rising up and up and up. And that as it was going up, my eyes are completely closed. I'm not picturing anything. I'm not seeing anything. No thoughts. That's the key. There was no thoughts. And it just got brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. It was so bright. It was such an intense experience. It's so hard to put into words, right? I can explain to you I saw a light, but it just doesn't do it justice. Like, maybe I could say like there's 10,000, like a star's illumination, like brighter than that. Yeah, but at the same time, you're able to look at it, like, and take it in. And it was so intense, like, all I could do was just, take it in, and I just felt tears coming out of my eyes. And then after that, when I slowly, started to feel like I was coming back, kind of, consciousness dropping back into my body. After that, man, for, 2-3 days, I was just, I've never done any kind of drugs or anything, right? So I can't, talk about that, but I just felt very, very, very calm, very, very just posed, just calm, peace. And it's something, I don't know if you could say it's the ego or not, but it's something I saw inside that, it just can't be explained. It was just amazing.
That's how a lot of Christian literature describes God too. Like, if he appears in the human realm, it's just like this blinding light that you can barely even look at.
But also, I guess, translucent, or in a sense. Is that how it was for you, kind of? Because you said you could stare at it, right?
The light, it didn't have, I would say, the closest color you could say would be white. Like
a diamond, maybe?
No, not really a diamond. It just filled the entire perspective. It just filled all areas.
That's fascinating to hear from both of you guys, because the one that I'm familiar with is the Bardo Thol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it characterizes multiple stages of ego dissolution up until you reach the final point of connection with everything. And what they characterize that as is the great white light. They say it's this translucent, clear, it doesn't really have a color, but it's just a bright light, and then it just connects you to everything. And once you're there, you've stepped away from all conception of everything else.
And the beauty is, it's truly something I feel like everyone can experience. And what's really interesting to notice, right? I said, when it happened, I had no thoughts. No, it was like when you're describing prayer, right? Prayer in Christianity, it's like you're not thinking anything. You're just in awe. That was like the full embodiment of awe for me. But the second I begin to have a thought, that's when I kind of dropped down out of that. And there's so many other experiences I could talk from meditation that were similar to that.
I wonder if people who would be characterized as enlightened, I guess in the Buddhist sense, are able to hold on to that state in their day-to-day existence.
So personally, I do know people who do experience that, but at a 24/7 scale. And it's something, like I said, once you experience just like a second of it, it's just, you can't really comprehend it. So the fact that there's people out there that do hold on to this light, I think from my experience, I believe that is what enlightenment is, when you just reach that 24/7.
Yeah, one last thing that I want to talk about is the connection between music and God, because like I said earlier, to me, God is the transcendent when you're always trying to reach out to the transcendent, and for me, the easiest way to do that, the most natural way to do that, is through music.
Yeah, so I even mentioned earlier how worship was probably the closest thing in Christianity to meditation. And I mean, I think that I've thought this for a long time, but I think harmony is like one of the easiest ways that I can see God. At one point in the past, I don't even remember like the specifics of the circumstances, but I heard probably a choir or something, and like in that moment when I heard the voices and heard that so many different pitches, different notes could sound perfect together, I was like, wow, I think that heaven is real, because the fact that things that are so different can make something so new when they're put together is really fascinating for me. And I was wondering earlier when you said that Sikhism was largely about learning how to hear and see God. I was wondering, like, do you think that it's the case that no one can hear or see God, like, without exploring or seeking for God? Or do you think that those things, that God can be evident through beauty and through music and through other things without necessarily seeking?
Right. So it's interesting. That's a really good question, by the way. So the sound and hearing, it is like part of, like, there has to be some sort of search, like, but even as a kid, actually, I used to hear sounds, and I never really understood what it was. I thought, oh, maybe my ears are just like, my ears would get blocked and I would just hear loud ringing sounds or whatnot, right? I thought, okay, maybe it's just my ears, and my doctor say, oh, it's just, your ears just doing whatever, right? And when I noticed I started more and more meditation, like, I started hearing these sounds more and more often, and so to the point it'd be present all the time. And music is, like, definitely a big part of it. Like, the whole Guru Granth Sahib, our scripture, is actually written in poetry. Everything rhymes. Everything's actually supposed to be sung. Music is a big part of it. And I think, actually, one key thing I didn't really talk about, we believe everything in the spiritual journey that you do, like, to experience, it's also this whole physical world that we live in, this whole life. It's also, like, they're very hand in hand. They're like metaphors for each other. So, like, for example, we have a marriage, like, we play music, like, while we sing these hymns, right? And in the same way, you're supposed to be able to hear these sounds and hymns from God himself, from the inside. And that's just one example. But, like, the same way, there's lots of instruments, like, in a traditional sense in Sikhism, there's kind of like a piano kind of instrument, like, it's called a harmonium. It's kind of mixes like an accordion with the piano. And then there's drums, right? And there's, I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't, like, I haven't gotten to that point yet. But we believe, like, when you get to God himself, like, at God's door or whatever, like, that experience before you get to meet God, you hear 5 sounds, actually. And those 5 sounds are actually replicated with some of these instruments. One of them is like a big, like deep drum, like snare bass, and another one is like a war horn kind of thing. So there's lots of sounds. We believe that, you know, they have all these like meanings, and you know, they're very, very similar. Like a lot of things you'll see in this world, like in the creation, is example or like of what is to come in the spiritual journey too.
Yeah, and music is also really important for social connections. Like, for instance, like when people are playing music together or singing hymns together or something like that, they actually get their brains kind of firing at the same time. I've seen a few papers about it, but if you've ever played music or sung hymns with other people, like you experience a connection with them, and you grow closer to them just by partaking in the same music.
I feel like music and religion is very uplifting, because it's like it takes your mind to that place without having to necessarily. It's a tool, like, you know, we use music as a tool to uplift our minds and, you know, perform that kind of worship.
So real quick, I just wanted to give our guests a chance to talk about any organizations on campus that anybody can join or talk to get started with any type of religious experiences they might want to experience.
Yeah, so I've been involved in 2 campus ministries here. The one that I'm currently involved in is Crew. It's really just a community of a lot of people who come from a lot of different backgrounds, you know, religious backgrounds, non-religious, have a lot of different other details about people. You know, there's a lot of different types of people there, which is a really cool part of the ministry. They just have a service every Thursday night from 8 to 10, just pretty much like a church service, but mostly college kids. It's just a really cool time. There are a lot of community groups and social aspects to it also, and they're honestly really open to anybody who's even just interested in learning what Christianity is. I also was involved in Chi Alpha a little bit my freshman year, which is pretty similar, different some aspects, but I won't get into that, but it's also a really great community. So
cool. So for me, we have a 6 student association at Virginia Tech. The president of it. Essentially, anyone it's open to everyone, right? We mainly just focus on, you know, service oriented, right? And just discussing Sikhism and, you know, just practical things, right? And one thing we have open to anyone is meditation. Usually it's on Wednesdays, 6 to 7 p.m. But I don't have a specific schedule for it this semester yet, but that will be updated. And if you go on Galva Connect, you feel free to contact me, email me, or speak to me. We can talk about any of this kind of stuff.
And we'll make sure to put in the show notes links for everything that was just talked about.
For more information on ODIN, check out our social media linked in the description below. If you'd like to attend a discussion, check us out on Facebook. We frequently update our events there. If you'd like to start a show or pitch a topic, send us an email at odinspeak@gmail.com. That's ODIN speak@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.